Well, hi there. Hello. And welcome back to the Pitch Grid, the podcast that brings you news, insight, and analysis from both sides of the footballing world, the NFL and the EFL championship. Yes, we are back. It's been a bit, I know, but I had to take care of some personal issues. But we are back and better than ever and hoping to bring you just the same great content as you have come to expect from this podcast. We have a lot to get into today, including Terry McLaurin, Micah Parsons, and Trey Hendrickson in their respective hold-ins, their trade requests. Micah Parsons is deteriorating relationship with the Cowboys. Trey Hendrickson reporting back to the Bengals, and Terry McLaurin's request for a trade. All been in a busy week's work in the NFL. Baker Mayfield clapping back at the Browns on New Heights podcast. Could he have turned the tide possibly for Cleveland if he had stayed? The Hall of Fame game was yesterday. We look over what happened and some of the big takeaways, as well as looking ahead to the Hall of Fame class of 2025, and then to next year's class and who we think might be the ones to get in among the finalists. NFL also debuted their virtual measuring system, and we'll be going over the pros and cons of that as well, trying to give perspective to a issue that is already becoming quite controversial. And then we have our top five that we have been doing in the past. And then we get into EFL championship stuff, including Sheffield Wednesday updates. Morecambe is in deep trouble as well. And our League One, League Two relegation and promotion contenders, as well as a full 1 to 24 table for the championship, which is back next week. Footy is back in the air, as is NFL football. We are so excited. Hope you are as well. Also, one housekeeping thing before we get into the content. We ran a poll on all our social medias asking you, our fans, what you would like us to call you. And it was a very close race. Y'all made it so close. In fact, it was a three-way tie for a long time between three different ones, the Blitz Crew, the Sideline Syndicate, and a 92-32. But 92-32 won out in the end, 8-7 to 7-2. And we did have a write-in option for y'all, but 92-32 won out. And the reason I came up with 92-32, and some have asked me why, twofold reason really, because it's like a stadium section, and also there are 92 teams in the top four tiers of English football, as well as 32 teams in the NFL. I combined them, and it's kind of like a unique thing, I thought, and it really sounds good off the tongue, and y'all chose it in the end. So that is what we're going to be calling y'all from now on. So stay tuned for any upgrades on the content as well. Now, with that out of the way, let's head grid side and talk about everything happening in the NFL. So, like we mentioned, there has been a lot going on in terms of recent hold-ins and holdouts by the likes of Terry McLaurin, Micah Parsons, and Trey Hendrickson. Let's start with Trey Hendrickson. While the last couple of weeks have been a little interesting, really, in terms of what Hendrickson has really wanted to do, the sides are still nowhere close to a deal, according to many reports, and it's kind of gone weirdly. He stayed in Cincinnati for a bit, but then moved down to Florida. But then when training camp started again, he moved back up to Cincinnati for a bit and reported to training camp to be with the team. Now, again, sides are not close on a deal yet. The team still wants him to take a pretty hefty pay cut, I believe. And Hendrickson, of course, wants TJ Watt styles of money, I believe, or even more. There's reports that he wants more than the Jamar Chase deal for a non-quarterback. I mean, it's deserved, I think. He led the league in sacks last year. He's a very consistent player. He knows what he's doing and is one of the more consistent defenders. He had another good year the year before that as well, and it just really wasn't noticed by the national media and the fans as well until last year when he did lead the league in sacks. I think it's really stand up of him to report to Bengals camp in spite of all the acrimony, and as much as we might dog on some players for not being loyal, like T.O. crunching in his driveway, talking to reporters about his contract, Hendrickson is still being a a guy who's trying to balance, I think, going between playing hardball with the Bengals and trying to get what he feels like he's worth, and also trying to be loyal to the teammates because I think he really does love being with the players he has played with the last few years in Cincinnati and has loved being in that organization. It's just the franchise itself and the ownership is not taking his situation into consideration and paying him like he deserves. Now, with Terry McLaurin, this is kind of also a bizarre situation because the two sides have not really had much communication, it seems. McLaurin has reported to OTAs and mini camps, and he even reported to training camp. He did say, though, he had an injury, and it did feel like a hold in. And then yesterday, the news broke that he has put in a trade request with Washington. Now, this is kind of significant because McLaurin's not been one, really, in his 6 years playing with the Commanders to really put up a fuss about anything, really. He's taken the contract extension, I believe, before and really hasn't put up much of a fuss. And now he's tired of it. And it seems like he was ready to get the heck out of DC and go to somewhere else where he feels like he can be respected. Now, reports are as well that he does want somewhere around Jamar Chase type money for a receiver. Is he worth that is the question. And to me, I don't know. He is one of the better receivers when he is healthy. That is the problem with Terry McLaurin. He is not always healthy. But when he is, he's still very talented and he doesn't have the top speed he had when he came into the league, but he still is a very dangerous number one receiver and would be a great fit on any winning team's roster. Now, what Washington would require for a trade is still unknown. It feels like they could probably ask for a lot and try to hardball and just keep him there in Washington until they can maybe sort out a contract. That is a very good possibility as well. The teams I could see going for Terry McLaurin are varied, and we'll get into this in a bit after we talk about the Micah Parsons thing because I do want to talk about teams that could go in for each of these players that are still holding in. There's a lot of interest, I would think, with these kinds of players because these are some of the top players in their position groups in the league. So it's very fascinating because I mean, we all, I think, consider McLaurin one of the top receivers in the game, right? I would say probably top 10, maybe top 15, depending on who you are and what your rankings of receivers are. That can vary from time to time. I can see why the Commanders don't want to pay him because I think they feel like he's not going to be good long term. My thing is they have the cap space to do this deal. They have one of the biggest cap spaces in the league, and yet they are still not willing to pay it up. To me, this feels like Washington is ready to move on from McLaurin, though it feels like a big mistake considering they really don't have much after him in terms of receivers. Debo Samuel, I think, is the next best thing, and Debo has not been very reliable either in terms of his health. McLaurin's been way more reliable even then in that department. So I don't know. I feel like it'd be a bad move for Washington to let him go through with this trade request. Just pay the man, really, is my thing. Micah Parsons is also on this list because it's been a very weird back and forth situation. It's come in that, Jerry Jones has said they want to pay him. They want to keep Micah a Cowboy. Stephen Jones, though, at the same time, is also saying Micah should accept the contract they are giving him and just play. And the news that has come out today about this is that the relationship is deteriorating between Parsons and the Cowboys. And it sounds like basically this is falling apart at the seams for the Cowboys and that they might not be able to get this deal done. Because it sounds like Parsons is fed up, not only with probably some of the remarks that Stephen Jones has said in the last few weeks, but in general, I think, with how they are just not willing to just come to the table and pay up a good amount of money for him because he has shown when healthy, he is an incredible talent at the pass rusher. He's still considered a top 5 pass rusher, I think, in most people's minds. It's very questionable why he has not been paid up by the Cowboys. Of course, the Cowboys take forever with their extensions and their contracts with players that they already have in the building. I don't know. To me, why are you taking so long? This feels very much like the CD Lamb situation, or Dak, really, to be honest. Except Parsons is actually kind of holding in a bit. He has reported to training camp. He has played with the Cowboy team in all their training sessions. It's been more of a soft hold in until today. Now, what this fallout's going to be from the reports of Adam Schefter and others who reported today about this deteriorating situation, we have yet to see. And I want to see this snowball effect, because what does that look like in terms of how Parsons plays with the team if he starts not reporting to training camp, if he decides to hold out and miss camp? Now, there are certain fines associated with that. We saw that with Chris Jones when he held out for his contract, which he deservedly got the last year. I just don't know if Micah is actually going to get this contract. He deserves it, but the question is now, again, we keep coming back to this. The market value versus the player value. And the market value has just ballooned things to an effect now that people are looking at the Jamar Chase money the Bengals have given him. The Bengals have now become part of this problem, I think. Now, it's not just the Deshaun Watson contract, which is the foundation for all of this mess, right? It has skyrocketed the value of every single player and ballooned it to an effect of inflation. But now that the Bengals paid Jamar Chase the most money for a non-quarterback ever, now other players are wanting that and saying, okay, this is the benchmark. I want more than that. And of course, each team is trying to play a game of chicken and seeing who's going to fall first and pay up their big player that is not a quarterback. And that is the common theme, I think, between these three that we are seeing is these teams are not willing to just pay up because they don't want to pay this kind of money, even though these are great players. Though I would argue the Cowboys and Bengals are much more on the cheap side of things and want it just because they're cheap and they don't want it because they think the player value is there. I would argue probably the Commanders actually just feel like they need to move on from Terry compared to Micah and Dallas and Trey and Cincinnati. Now, what teams realistically do we think could land these players? Let's start with Trey Hendrickson, right? Trey, there's been a lot of talk about him going to the Lions. The Commanders have also been touted about as a potential partner. Commanders have the cap space, yada yada. They need a pass rusher as well. I would say that's probably a good spot because for Trey Hendrickson, if I'm the Bengals, I'm not putting Trey Hendrickson anywhere in the AFC. As much as I'm sure any AFC team would take Trey Hendrickson, I do not think that is a smart idea. If I'm the Bengals, he is staying far away from the AFC, and I'm not taking any calls from that conference. I'm exclusively thinking NFC. And with that in mind, I do think the Commanders are probably a good pick. I think Detroit could be a good option as well. I don't think their cap space would allow for it, though. Detroit's D line's getting decimated low key. If you look at the injuries, it's been piling up again. That is something to keep an eye on in Detroit. The injuries on the defensive side of the ball are starting to really pile up. And while Trey would be a good addition and could be a nice pairing with Aiden Hutchinson, for example, I don't know if Detroit's actually going to pull the trigger. I would think, honestly, the Commanders feel like one of the better options, really, in this scenario. Tampa did lose a pass rusher and a defensive lineman lately. I don't to injury. I don't know if they have the amount that Trey would want to pay him with a contract, unless somehow this is a trade that we're speculating a trade at this point because he still has time on this contract. I don't know if Tampa, unless Cincinnati pays up a bulk of the contract that he currently has, and then Tampa is willing to pay up a huge contract and pony up to the bar for that. I don't think they have that kind of space to do that. The Raiders, low key, have the cap space to do this. Make it a Max Crosby, Trey Hendrickson duo. But again, I don't think that's a good idea if you're the Bengals because then you have to play him potentially in the playoffs if the Raiders even make it to that point. I don't think that's this year, but the Raiders made some decent moves, but they still have a long ways to go in my opinion. That is a team to keep an eye on potentially as well. With Terry McLaurin, again, this feels tricky because you have to think about teams that can actually pay up the money, and that doesn't feel like a ton of teams. I've seen people saying Buffalo. I don't think they have that cap at all. They've been dealing in negative cap for so long, and to me, that feels like the last option as well that McLaurin wants because if he truly does want the huge contract and he really does want Chase money, I don't think Buffalo can afford that. And how much longer you actually going to have? I believe Terry McLaurin is close to 30. if not in his 30s already. So, do you want a receiver in his 30s who may have 2 or 3 years of his prime left for that much money? It's tough to say. And I mean, watch somehow the Chiefs maybe get him, right? That could be an interesting option if like the Chiefs were to somehow finagle cap space. I don't think they will, but that would be kind of an interesting option to add him to a receiving room that is already pretty deep. But to add him as a clear number one could be the icing on the cake in terms of the Chiefs' offense and make them actually maybe a really good offense, in my opinion. Realistically, the Green Bay Packers could be an option for McLaurin. Now, do you go with the argument that you go with Trey Hendrickson? Do you want McLaurin out of the NFC? If you're the Commanders, if you do decide to trade him, do you trade him exclusively AFC? In that case, again, let's look back at the Raiders here. Raiders need a clear number one receiver. They do not have a clear number one. And Jacoby Myers, yes, he's good, but I would argue he's more of a wide receiver 2 option. And if you can get a clear number one there in Las Vegas, things could be a little different in terms of how that offense looks with Geno Smith at the helm. And they have the cap space to be able to give McLaurin a huge contract. Now, would they actually want that when they are in a lot of ways getting younger at a lot of positions? That's the counter argument you could have for that. Another one that could be interesting, I don't know, maybe the Jets, maybe, but I kind of doubt it. Everyone feels pretty set with their rosters at this point, and it feels like unless a huge, massive deal is offered for McLaurin or Hendrickson or Parsons, no one is going to really want to scoop up these players right now because it feels like a lot of these teams are pretty set with their rosters. But I could see Vegas, maybe New York Jets, maybe someone like Indianapolis or Jacksonville, maybe. I don't think they will. I don't think either of those teams can pony up to the bar right now and really offer that kind of deal. Those are some options in the AFC. In the NFC, I wouldn't be shocked if like someone like Green Bay snipped around this. Because yes, though, and right now they have enough receivers for days. The Niners maybe potentially could sniff around this as well, considering they really don't have anyone outside of Brandon Ayuk and Ricky Pearsall. And even then, like Ayuk is the more dependable of the two, and we don't really know what Ricky Pearsall is going to look like this year. I just don't know like what team's actually going to want to pay a huge contract to a receiver when most teams feel set at this point. It might have to happen more around the trade deadline. So, depending on what happens this season, we might get more of a clearer picture on this. Micah Parsons, it is reported that he might hand in a trade request or do something else. Micah Parsons, again, this feels tricky, and right now we really don't know what's going to happen. So I'm going to say right now there's no clear offer for a trade or anything like that. But again, I think it's similar with Trey Hendrickson. You want him out of the NFC. Do you want him in division? Like the Commanders could go after him. The Niners, maybe, if they want a pass rusher to complement Nick Bosa. If you're an NFC team, you definitely want him gone from the Cowboys. But at the same time, do you really think the Cowboys are really going to compete this year with Brian Schottenheimer at the helm as the coach? That's another question. And there's a lot of things that could happen as a result of this quote unquote deteriorating relationship that we will have to see. I'm very interested to see what unfolds from that. There's so many dynamics here at play that it feels like any of these situations could go either way. And it's just the modern age of contract negotiations in the NFL. And it just really throws a wrench, I think, into a lot of dynamics, locker room dynamics, and how fans view the player and how other players view him as well. Very interesting situations going into the beginning of the season, beginning of preseason, really. Let's go to Baker Mayfield, clapping back at his former team. I did make a short about this, but it feels like a very interesting topic to think about. So Baker Mayfield went on to the New Heights podcast and was talking about, his off season, what the future looks like, and how he's grown since everything that happened in Cleveland. Now, yeah, that everything that went down in Cleveland, but then Jason asks Baker Mayfield what he thinks about the current situation in Cleveland. And of course, it's quite the mess right now. Kenny Pickett having that hamstring issue and no one really knowing if it's an ACL or something more serious potentially. They're still not really clear on that issue. And right now, currently, it's believed that Joe Flacco, Dylan Gabriel, and Kenny Pickett are the leaders in the clubhouse for the quarterback one position in Cleveland heading into the season. And Mayfield basically said, I plead the fifth. It's not my problem anymore. And he's right. It really isn't his problem. And he did also say that when he was healthy there, he was pretty good. You could say that. I have seen some people say that he was actually rather mid. And I can see argument both ways because while like that one season they won that one playoff game against the Steelers, and then went on to lose to the Chiefs. So he was decent, but he wasn't like an MVP candidate by any means, but like he is nowadays in Tampa. But the question is, could he have changed the temperature in Cleveland around football significantly if the Browns hadn't forced him out because they wanted Deshaun Watson? I think that's a great question, but I don't know how much we really could say because while he had the team and the coaches in place to help him succeed, it feels like that was more of an ownership thing. And with ownership really wanting Watson to come through, it feels like either way, the coaching staff, even if they wanted Baker to stay, were screwed, to be honest. And no matter what they wanted, it wasn't going to happen because Jimmy and Haslam and the Haslam family wanted Deshaun Watson in, and we've seen how that has gone from there. Meanwhile, Baker has done pretty well for himself in Tampa, has had a couple of like MVP caliber seasons, and he has had really good stats. Now, my question also with this is this success in Tampa a result of him being really good, or is this more of the coaches and the players and the team around him being good and he's just benefiting from all of that? I would argue it's a bit of both. I would argue that yes, Baker does have the acumen and the ability to be good, and he has shown that. He showed that he can be very accurate. He had the highest completion percentage of his career last year in Tampa. So he's showing he's getting better with his accuracy, and that's not something that you really can attribute to someone else. That is absolutely strictly a thing for a quarterback to be proud of, and your completion percentage and how you take care of the ball. Do you get the ball to your receivers is the biggest job for a quarterback, right? But also, he has great players like Mike Evans and Chris Godwin, and that can be huge because, these are some of the best in the business in terms of wide receiver ones and wide receiver twos. Now, how much Mike Evans is still a top receiver one, it can be debated probably because some would say he's probably declining, but he's still getting over 1,000 yards every year and he's still looking very dangerous. And Chris Godwin, of course, when he's healthy, can be a really good wide receiver too. Now, some would say he's fallen off, but this year could be huge in determining that as well. And you've got offense in Tampa that this year they're going to have another coordinator change because again, their coordinator leaves for a coaching job. I think really this year could tell us a lot about what Baker looks like. But I do think you can't just say that it's all due to Tampa being good, the team around him. It is also him as well contributing to the success that Tampa has had lately in his couple of years, and his stats show that it's not just the team, that he also is contributing significantly to this. And I think you can't take that away from him as much as you might not think he's a top 10 quarterback. His stats prove that he is definitely up there in that conversation, and he has definitely turned himself around from his Cleveland and Carolina days, and even maybe, depending on what you think about the little brief spell he had with the Rams as well. But I mean, when he was in Carolina, he looked bad. He really looked bad. So I mean, you could say this is very much coaching, and this is part of why I am still high on Todd Bowles. I don't think you can take away Todd Bowles' impact of picking out good, smart choices for coaches to help Baker Mayfield grow. And, Tampa took a risk on Baker. I think we all thought this was a bit of a risk when he signed with Tampa, and it's paid off because the coaching has been right and has been perfect to help him succeed and grow, and he has the weapons around him. I mean, Cleveland had the weapons around him, and they really didn't do much besides that one year they went to the playoffs. But again, he was being forced out at that point. So I would say it's a bit of a 50-50 balancing act, maybe 60-40. I would say it's a bit of both, that you can't just say, well, Baker's being carried exclusively. I don't like it when people say a quarterback is being carried exclusively Because you can't say that and then go say, oh, well, this quarterback is bad because he's being carried. Because no one team carries a quarterback. A quarterback has to do his job as well. And if you say he's being carried, that mitigates the job that he is doing to get the ball to his receivers and making sure that he is controlling the game like he is supposed to. So I think it's a give and take situation. I do think it's pretty cool how we clutch back. I would go check out that episode of New Heights. It was a good episode, very informative, and gives you a lot of insight into how Baker's feeling ahead of the season. And it's just fun to hear the actual clip because he said it in a very swag way. You can definitely tell Baker's when he is on, like when he was in college, when he was on, his confidence showed and he had that swagger, and it feels like he's starting to get that back after after his time in Carolina, and it felt like his confidence was shot, and now it feels like he's got that confidence back. He's got that mojo he had at Oklahoma. If he keeps it up, who were we to say that he actually hasn't turned the corner, and that if he had been surrounded with good coaching, good mentors like he has had with maybe Todd Bowles being a bit of that, as well as Liam Cohen and David Canales, then he wouldn't have taken off sooner, maybe in Cleveland or Carolina. That is the great question I think we all will have when it comes to Baker Mayfield. Would he have succeeded better if he had had better surrounding cast than he did? Because, of course, Cleveland's a dumpster fire. So, moving on from that, we have football coming back last night, and it was awesome seeing a game happen even though it was a massive blowout. Detroit, its backups, man, that was something else. I can't imagine what Lions fans felt seeing all that. It must have, even if it's a preseason game, the quarterback two situation. Let's get into this right away. The quarterback two situation in Detroit. This looks paper thin. If we're going based off of the Hall of Fame game, you have got to hope that Jared Goff does not get hurt, because otherwise it looks like a cliff going from Jared Goff to quarterback two. If that is what we were going to see from the quarterbacks behind him, and that sucks because like this is a Detroit team. Like when you look at the starting part, looks very solid on paper. But then if you want to look preseason, you're usually seeing what kind of depth you have, what kind of how deep is a team and how good can they be. And again, preseason is kind of meaningless nowadays with 3 games and teams playing very vanilla playbooks and all of that. But still, you can kind of see the depth and the options that a team has as well in preseason and how good they are and how good they might not be. And I think we are seeing right now that Detroit needs to get a better quarterback too if they want to succeed, because a fully healthy season for a quarterback is not always guaranteed. And I know the good ones can be very extremely lucky in their health and all that. And Goff has been very lucky and fortunate to not be majorly injured, but you never know. And I hate to say it, but like Detroit does need to be prepared in case that happens. And oh boy, that sight last night was tragic. It is a preseason game, and who knows, it might be totally different come the end of preseason. But I have little hopes on that. Meanwhile, the Chargers quarterback situation, in comparison with Trey Lance, looks amazing. If Trey Lance plays like that every time he steps on the field, he is still be in San Francisco right now, being the starting quarterback and not Brock Purdy. He went 13 of 20, 120 yards, and 2 touchdowns. That is great. He looked like a master general out there, just making great throws, making great choices. If he wanted an exhibition game to show how good he can be, Trey Lance had that last night. And we've seen bits and pieces of him showing that in San Francisco, a couple of times in Dallas, but this was his master opus, his magnum opus, really. His game that he was saying, I'm here and I can still compete in the NFL. And you've got to feel good for him on that, because he's been pretty roundly criticized for not having the talent to play in this league. And yet now, if you're the Chargers going into the season, yes, it's against backups and not against the starting team, but it does feel, you have to feel a lot better about the chances you have if Herbert goes down. That could drastically change once we get into the regular season and Lance has to face actual tough opposition. We're praying that Justin Herbert doesn't get hurt. but you always have to be prepared for that. And if Trey Lance can continue this in preseason and look good, you have to feel good if you're a Chargers fan that your quarterback two situation could be very secure. I do want to address another thing from Detroit, and that is it's starting to become a concern. I mentioned this earlier, and the Detroit depth in the secondary is also becoming a problem. You have injuries to Terrion Arnold and Kirby Joseph in training camp, and those look like they could be issues going from significant to maybe some minor issues, but you really don't know. And it feels very up in the air that it could be very perilous for Detroit, because this was something I was looking at coming into the season, and that is the depth that this team has in the secondary. And while while they have like DJ Reed on paper, DJ Reed is very good, and he was a great quarterback two option next to Sauce Gardner. But if this keeps up, and we had some more injuries last night, on a scale of 1 to 10, how much are you concerned about this secondary for Detroit and the defense in general? Because the injuries are mounting up on the defensive side of the ball again for Detroit, and that's kind of been like the battle cry. Oh, well, Detroit's actually healthy this year. Well, now they're starting to mount up injuries again on the defensive side of the ball. And if it keeps up, you have to worry that this team might struggle a bit and might take a step back. It might not be a major one, but we might not see the team that we saw last year. And I think that's kind of what we're going to see. Now, of course, hopefully that Arnold and Joseph come back very soon. Those are key pieces to this Lions secondary. And if they come back and all is well, then I think you have a good chance to actually compete and maybe look better than you did. But still, it's very suspect when you have this kind of paper thin depth in the secondary and you have a lot of question marks coming into it. It's just something to keep an eye on, I think, because while I really do like Detroit and the team that they have, this secondary depth is starting to concern me a bit. And another positive for the Chargers, Nico Reed actually had an interception yesterday in the Hall of Fame game, and he looked good. Now, I'm not saying he's going to be a starting cornerback for the Chargers by any means, but I would not be shocked if this guy cuts himself out a piece of the pie in the roster game, because he looked good, and I think Harbaugh really likes guys who are underdogs and who play well and are gritty and gutty. And that's kind of what Nico Reed is looking like right here for the Chargers. I would not be shocked maybe if he goes on like special teams or is like a cornerback 2 or 3 in the depth chart, like, backup corner, not like the actual cornerback 2, like on the starting. But he could be like a backup option. And that wouldn't be too bad, honestly. That was pretty cool to see an individual breakout performance. Now, can he keep that up in the preseason is also the question, because we've seen guys have a breakout preseason game and then just fall flat. But if he does, you know, play pretty well this preseason, I think he's probably cut himself out a spot, which is really cool. Coming into this, we all knew that this was the Hall of Fame game. And with the Hall of Fame game comes Hall of Fame weekend. The inductees this year are very interesting. Eric Allen, Jared Allen, Sterling Sharp, and Antonio Gates. All great players. Eric Allen, a Raiders and Eagles legend. He's the first Eagles cornerback, actually, to go into the Hall of Fame, interestingly enough. Jared Allen, Chiefs and Bears and Panthers legend, absolute wrecking ball and a menace. He always acted like a madman, but he was such a good pass rusher, and I loved watching him in his day. Sterling Sharp, electric receiver. I am so sad I didn't get to see him play live, and he had that devastating injury that forced him to retire. He couldn't play after that. And Sharp's brother, and he does deserve to be in the Hall of Fame, and I think this is a really cool moment for the Sharp family. And then Antonio Gates, of course, one of the great tight ends of the modern era. Everything in his path, and truly a Chargers icon. Congrats to them. These guys definitely deserved it. I asked this in a short, but each of these guys are great legends of the game, and of course, getting inducted into the Hall of Fame celebrates your accomplishments and your achievements as one of the best to ever do it. I loved it when that short. I asked who was your favorite and why, and I'd have to go with Jared Allen, just because I loved watching him play. I love Antonio Gates, and Eric Allen was too old for me, and Sterling Sharp, again, I never got to see him live, unfortunately, barely. And Jared Allen just sticks out to me. He sticks out to me because he just played with a ferocity and a tenacity that really no one can really deny. And it was just fun to watch him play and go and get the quarterback. Quarterbacks had nightmares. They were scared of this guy. And he even got to a Super Bowl too with the Panthers, I believe, in 2015, which I thought was so cool. And it's so unfortunate that he didn't actually get to win a ring. Overall, all four of these deserved to go in. And then let's look ahead a bit because the 2026 finalists are here for the Hall of Fame. And we've got the likes of Drew Brees, Larry Fitzgerald, Jason Witten, Frank Gore, and Julian Edelman, and Greg Olson, and LaShawn McCoy, Des Bryant, Geno Atkins, Stephen Gostkowski, Philip Rivers, and Marquise Pouncey. Now, I did rank some offensive linemen, or it might have been a couple of episodes ago, but I did put Pouncey as one of the better offensive linemen of his day, and it's true. He was one of the best offensive linemen of the Twins. But there's so many good choices here that you have to look at, and I would have to say that probably Drew Brees is a shoe-in as a first-time Hall of Fame candidate, and I would also say probably Larry Fitz as well, considering what he did for Arizona in that franchise. And Frank Gore, being one of the top 5 rushers of all time, I bet he probably gets in as well. Though I want to shout out Steven Gostkowski for being a very underrated selection here because he was so good as a kicker, and he kicked the Patriots to many Super Bowl and was just so accurate in his day that I think he gets overlooked, and I'm glad we get to see a kicker in this. Of course, Shady McCoy, no defense wanted to take part in trying to tackle that guy. Absolute legend of the game when he played. Geno Atkins, beast of a pass rusher. Of course, Philip Rivers, one of the best to ever not win a ring at the quarterback position. As Brian, of course, we're always going to remember him for if he caught it or not. But Des Bryant is just always such a monster of a wide receiver. In his prime, no one stopped that guy. And Julian Edelman, to me, feels like the black sheep of this. Because while, yes, he was a clutch receiver in the playoffs, his individual accomplishments to me don't scream Hall of Fame worthy. Of all of these candidates, him and Jason Witten feel like the odd ones out. Because I can see all of these really and make an argument for even like Greg Olson, making it to a Super Bowl with the Panthers in 2015 and being a cornerstone of that Panthers franchise for so long. And yet with Witten, yes, he was a great player, Witten was, but like he never really did much outside of that. His statistical accomplishments are okay, but like nothing jumps out at you as saying like he's Hall of Fame worthy. Because if we're talking Hall of Fame, we're talking about players that are the best of the rest, right? Guys that you would have to say are absolute the best of the game and represent the or have a huge impact on the game in terms of how they played and what they mean to the game itself. And with Witten, you really don't see that besides just he was a great tight end and hustled hard and was so fun to watch just being a bruiser of a tight end. Edelman, he has much more of an impact historically speaking on his legacy in terms of like undrafted players and how short route receivers like him. Nowadays, we always look for good hands, and why? That's because Julian Edelman was a huge part of that, and how good he was at catching and making sure he could, take that 5 yard route and then take it to the house from there. But other than that, like his individual statistical accomplishments don't jump out at you. To me, I like a lot of these options. These are a lot of good options, but Witten and Edelman just stick out like sore thumbs to me. They just don't feel like they're the right candidates right now for the Hall of Fame. I guess right isn't the right word, but like they don't feel like Hall of Fame worthy to me. I don't know. Maybe that's just me. I would love to hear any opinions that are different than that. NFL also yesterday in the Hall of Fame game debuted the virtual measuring. Now, of course, this was put into place because of the Bills Chiefs AFC Championship game and the spotting of the one fourth down call against Josh Allen that was claimed to be short. And a lot of people said that, he actually got the first down or whatever. It got debuted. There's been some backlash by some people, but a lot of people seem to like it a lot. To me, I think it's good if you want to be more accurate. Technology is absolutely going to be more and more of a part of this game as we go on in the years, and it's not just going to be always human error. But human error is still a part of officiating the game, in my opinion. And I do feel like there needs to be some room for that. And if you're going based off like virtual measuring and all that, I want to see how this goes first. I want to give it the benefit of the doubt because it's just one game and a lot of people seem to like it. And it wasn't awful, but at the same time, like I do feel like human error is a huge part of officiating as well. And you're gonna get wrong calls, and now people are just expecting perfection from referees and all that. Yes, you want a game called correctly most of the time, but at the same time, human error is still a thing. And I think you just need to be so careful about that. I feel like there are pros and cons to this, but I want to wait and see the impact of this and what actually is the fallout from it being in a few games a regular season and how it impacts a game compared to like we had the pass interference stuff, right, happen after the NFC Championship game with the Rams and the Saints. And of course that flopped miserably. Now we kind of have the same thing with this measuring thing. Is it going to flop? Are the refs going to really be sticklers with it and it just flops again? Or it could be a huge success. I'm hoping it is because we want these calls to be correct, right? But at the same time, I don't know. I want to see how it works and how it plays out because it's so fascinating to see where it might go and what improvements can be made on it. So there's a lot to go into this, and this is just the beginning at the Hall of Fame game. So we have yet to see the full impacts of it, but I'm kind of fascinated to see what happens. Um, Going into our top five now, we have the top. I decided we were going to do top five tight ends, but with a twist. And I'm going to kind of give my admittedly very weird fantasy opinion on it and say what I think their fantasy value might be. I'm not a huge expert on fantasy, just FYI. So here we go. Number five, I had Isaiah Likely, just because of his potential. If he can stay healthy, he has the athleticism and the jump and catch range and the speed to make himself such a dynamic tight end and be a great replacement for Mark Andrews, who's kind of declining a bit. So I really like Isaiah Likely, and he did pretty well in fantasy, I think, last year. I don't know exactly, but I would say he's probably a top five tight end fantasy in in terms of like fantasy impact he might have. And depending on what you do, PPR versus non PPR. If you are going PPR, I think he might actually be a very good value because he might get a lot of catches in this system because outside of Zay Flowers and Rashad Bateman and DeAndre Hopkins, there's not really a lot of options. And Isaiah Likely feels like a wide receiver two more in this system most a lot of the time. Last year, he had a huge impact on this offense when he was healthy. So I would say just keep an eye out for him. Number four, I have Mike Gesicki just because of how good he was with Cincinnati and how much of an impact he had as not only a catcher of the ball, but he also was a good blocker, run blocker too. And he's a very athletic guy, and he does so well getting into space. And when he does catch the ball in open field, he can take off and run, and is one of the better speedy tight ends in the game as well, even though he's getting up in age too. But I really like his upside when he is healthy and he is good, because when he was in Miami, he kind of showed a similar trait, and he has that jumping reach as well that is really, really desirable if you want a tight end. To me, he's probably not going to be much in terms of fantasy value because, of course, you're going to have a lot of targets in terms of Chase and Higgins. But still, I do think he's one of the top five tight ends in the game because he has such an impact, and he's very underrated because as a defense, you're always going to look at Chase and Higgins. But then, of course, you're going to have, if you cover them perfectly, Gesicki's going to just run open and he's going to have the ball and he'll tear you a new one if you aren't careful. Mike Gesicki for me at number four. Zach Ertz from Washington also is my number three tight end. I just like how he's so consistent, and in this offense, he can be so productive. We saw that last season and how he got a lot of yards and a lot of catches, and he might have to do that again this year, depending on what happens with Terry McLaurin. And Ertz is just he's getting up there in age, and he's not as durable as he has been in the past, but he definitely can still get you a lot of yards. And again, his fantasy value might not be very high. There's probably others you could probably get for better value, and like the next two I have on my list. but still, like, if you want some solid yards, Zach Ertz is the way to go. Sam Laporta is number 2 for me. He is so good at catching the ball, turning upfield, and just being a monster truck. Just trucking people, and he's so strong, but he also has great hands and soft hands as well. And he can just turn up the field in an instant and get you a lot of yards and yak. And as a tight end, that's kind of what you want from a tight end in fantasy. And I think he's got such high upside in terms of starting him as a tight end spot. And I just really like how he is, again, like we talked with Gesicki, you might cover Amon-Ra and a couple of other receivers, but then he gets open and Laporta can get open and just turn up field. Now, this Lions offense might look incredibly different without Ben Johnson, but still, Laporta is such a dynamic option at tight end. And Trey McBride, I think, obviously, is the number 1 choice at tight end in the league. He is just so young, but he's so dynamic and so good. He's got the strength, he's got the range, the athleticism, the catching ability. He, to me, reminds me a lot of young Travis Kelce, but not as hot-headed. And he is such a good option for Kyler Murray in Arizona. And I really hope that he can take off and become that kind of tight end because he has the upside to do it. And he was the top tight end in fantasy last year. I expect him to be any different than that this year. I think he's still going to get a lot of targets, a lot of catches, a lot of touchdowns, and a lot of yards as well. So I would not be shocked if he just improves on his year from last year, and his stock will only go up if he keeps going this trajectory. And with that, that is our grid side analysis for the episode. Let's head pitch side and talk some really interesting, juicy topics that for some clubs are incredibly tragic. Sheffield Wednesday is a dumpster fire since we last talked about them. So last time we talked, it was just kind of players aren't getting paid, right? But now it's so much more than that. They have not had a single preseason friendly since then. They are coming into a point now where July's wages have not been paid. They are coming into where the season is starting next week against Leicester City. They are coming into it with only 18 players total. That includes youth academy players, which is insane to think about. So you might be starting a lot of youth players in this lineup for Sheffield Wednesday against Leicester City. Not only that, the Stadium North stand has been condemned by the Sheffield City Council, and they have closed the stand effective immediately until it gets repaired because of a crumbling roof. Jamal Lowe came out today saying that the players are finding out a lot of this stuff through Twitter. They are not getting communication from the club itself, which is insane. How are you not getting communication from the club about your financial anything being paid? Nothing. You're finding out that you're not being paid on Twitter? Like, hello, what kind of HR do you have at Sheffield Wednesday? My word, that is horrible. And Chansiri has rejected $40 and $70 million bids for this club, by the way. He has rejected 2 different bids from very huge sources that could change this club, and he still's rejected it for who knows what reason. And it feels like, from what I am seeing, he is requiring very specific things to happen. And I believe he wants a lot of this up front because I believe one of the bids had a lot of the bid being contingent on like Premier League promotion and stuff like that. And I think because of that, I do think that he wants a lot of this bid if there is to be a successful bid up front, and he wants a lot of it in his hand in his account immediately, which is probably why. But still, like, the EFL needs to step in now. Why haven't they stepped in sooner on this? Because this is getting to the point where fans are protesting at Leicester City, apparently, according to some reports. There's also a planned storming the pitch at Hillsborough again in their match against Stoke, and it has just become mass chaos, and no one knows exactly how this is going to end or when it's going to end. The EFL, I think, is finally starting to step in and might try to force a sale of the club because at this point they have to, or else Sheffield Wednesday is going to go under. But the fact that this is showing that the fit and proper persons test does not effectively work for the EFL and is very much a sham. And it's because you let this kind of owner in, like Chansiri and Ilajala and at Hull City, who also has gotten them an embargo. Not only has Sheffield Wednesday gotten an embargo, if this keeps up, it'll only get worse for that embargo. The more he does not pay the players, the more that embargo will continue. And they already have some players like Max Lowe already saying he will leave the club because of this new 2-month span where now players can walk out on the club again, and Max Lowe is appearing to be one of those players. And already you've had Josh Windus leave on a free, and now he's with Wrexham. And Barry Bannon is still staying. Full credit to Barry Bannon for still training with the club, even though he's technically considered a free agent. He's still training with the club, and I think he plans to play with Sheffield Wednesday. It's insane that this is going on. This is finally the time that EFL is trying to step in. Now that they still haven't, they had to cancel a closed door friendly that it would have been their first preseason game, except it was canceled because now players are having to consider getting their own hotel room and driving themselves because the club will not pay for a hotel and cannot pay for a hotel for the team. So, yeah, it's just insane the depth of this and how it has gotten to this point. It's just baffling that the EFL is only now starting to get involved. And yes, this is very much on Chansiri that he is not. He's taken a lot of profit loss from this because he spent a lot. I believe it's somewhere around 150 million pounds, but he really hasn't sold really any players either for profit. He sold his players for very cheap when he has sold them, and it really hasn't helped profit the club any. So while he keeps spending, that means he's going to get more into debt, which means the club goes into more debt. And you had to feel so bad for these Wednesday fans because this is not what they want for their club at all. No one wants this for their club. No one wants to see them going down in flames, and that is exactly what Wednesday fans are seeing. And they have to pray that somehow there's a miracle bid somewhere, or the EFL will just forces Chansiri to do something, or DQs him and just puts the club into administration now, or because at this point, does he want this to be Morecambe? And speaking of Morecambe, they're in a very similar position, except they might be closing their doors like in the next couple of days. Like Punjab Warriors, who has been the huge bidder for the club lately, or Saudi Arabian, I believe, organization that takes a sports organization that tries to buy clubs like this. And they put out a statement yesterday begging Jason Whittingham, the current owner of Morecambe, to sell the club to them now and sign the deal, or else the club will close because there's £0 in the bank for this club. The academy is on the verge of shutting down. The players are about to have to go and be let go by the club, and it is so bad that if Whittingham doesn't sell the next couple of days, it's over for Morecambe. A 105-year-old club is over just because a guy who loves press releases more than life itself, apparently, because he releases them almost every day or so about imminent sale and then just cancels it. And according to a report today, he was contacted and he broke his silence and said that the club is quote unquote imminently for sale. I don't believe it. I do not believe a single bit of this at all. Because if that's true, he would have already sold this club like a million times over. Because he's said that so many times and has been found to be false. And I'm so because this is the National League has stepped in. You have to give them credit, even though it took them a while. The National League did step in and has tried all they could to save this club from itself. But Jason Whittingham has just been so obstinate about not selling it and has made a whole mess out of this. And yeah, this is exactly why these clubs need regulation and oversight. These clubs need regulation and oversight. And there are some people that are saying football doesn't need regulation. Oh, it absolutely does. Because otherwise, you're going to have owners like Dejan Chansiri and Jason Whittingham taking clubs into the absolute dirt and ruining not only a club, you are not only ruining players' livelihoods, you are ruining an economy. You are ruining a city. You are ruining people looking forward to a football match and taking away from the doldrum of a regular day. And now they have to think about maybe do they feel like they can support another club and really feeling disillusioned with it because of what's gone on at their club in the system. And I can't say I blame them because there is a lot of blood on these owners' hands, right? Not Whittingham and Chansiri, but the EFL and the National League need to be better as well. They also need to be better and make a better way to vet owners, potential owners, and make sure that they step in sooner before we get to the point of this club is about to die. Let's finally step in because otherwise we're going to lose a club. And yes, we all don't want that to happen, but it's getting increasingly likely that it will happen for both of these clubs. And it's so sad. It really is. Getting back onto a lighter note, footy is back. It really is. And I'm so excited. League One is coming back today. In fact, Luton Town hosts Wimbledon. And in League One, and Luton Town are the considered favorites, along with Plymouth Argyle and Huddersfield Town, and Luton Town are just in Cardiff City as well. In League Two, MK Dons and Chesterfield are also considered the favorites to come up to League One, but right now Luton Town is the favorites. They're facing Wimbledon, AFC Wimbledon, who got promoted from League Two last season. I'm not really sure like their chances in this game, AFC Wimbledon, just because they're newly promoted. Yes, they've made a couple of signings, but like still, I don't feel good about their chances. I do feel like they might be going back down if they don't do something about it. Wimbledon, Northampton Town, Mansfield Town are among the teams that the bookies are earmarking to be relegation candidates in League One. And in League Two, Newport County is the heavy favorite also for relegation. That just kind of shows you what the state of the league is like right now, for both League One and League Two as we head into this season. I do think Loontown should be the favorite. I really do. In League Two, in League One, in League Two, I really don't know. It does feel like MK Dons should be the favorite because of the signings and the quality of players they have in that league, and they were so close last year to make it to the final, I think. But still, like, you don't really know. And I'm so excited just to have a season back and running and to have some footy to watch every weekend. It's always so fun. And speaking of being back, Championship isn't back until next week, but I do have my final table for you. And this is going to be my final table before the season starts. It is my full 1 to 24, and we'll start from 24 up to 1. At 24, I have Sheffield Wednesday. I think that's pretty self-explanatory after what we just talked about. Just with everything going on, it feels like they have to be the favorites for relegation. They really do. Unless somehow we take a Disney movie miracle and just play amazingly, this team feels like it is destined to go down to League One and only plummet further. At 23, I have Oxford United. The defense looks solid. Gary Rowett is always going to be a defensive coach. I do like a couple of the midfield signings they have, but their attacking side just looks so weak. They cannot really be trusted, I think, really to score a ton of goals. And with Gary Rowett, you're not going to score a ton of goals, but still, I don't like their chances because with how chaotic the championship's going to be this year and some of the depth you have in the attacking third for a lot of these teams, you're going to need some attacking depth, and Oxford just do not have that. I have Preston North End tipped at 22. I just don't know if I really fully trust Preston to really. They might be able to escape, but I don't know. I feel like they've done okay. They've signed a lot of players, right? But I just don't know if they're really getting out of the not scoring a lot of goals rut, because that's kind of what Preston is. They're okay. You can rely on them to score maybe one goal in a match, but really not much more than that. And I kind of feel like they're still there. I feel like they really didn't change much in that department, and that will be their downfall, I think. And who knows? I might be totally proven wrong, but I just don't feel too inspired by this Preston team. Hull City, I have at 21. They also have this transfer embargo, but I do like the signings that they have had, last couple of signings. And I feel like they could barely escape again. The coach they have, he's from Turkey, and while Ilijala obviously has a bias toward his Turkey his Turkish league people, I feel like this is barely going to scrape by. I feel like this relegation battle could be really close. Blackburn Rovers, I have at 20. They have not had a lot of signings this season, and they just lost Callum Britton, I believe, today to Middlesbrough for 3.5 million, and they've got a lot of work to do in order to improve their defense. And I believe they only have a couple of reliable strikers, and even then, it doesn't look promising. So I feel like Blackburn are just going to have a rough season. Charlton Athletic have had a busy transfer window, but I have them at 19 just because I really don't feel like there's much that's changed with them. I do feel like these signings will have drastically improved their odds, because before that, I believe I had them at relegation depth. And I do think now with these signings, they have some midfield depth and some defensive depth but their striking quality just isn't there for me to trust them. Stoke City is at 18 for me. I do like Mark Robbins. I believe he is what's going to save this club from being relegated. He did turn them around at the end of last season, but I just don't know if I trust this club to do much. And they really haven't done much in the transfer window either. QPR I have at 17. They have made a couple of interesting signings, but it feels like they have a lot of the same team from last year, and a lot of these teams you're kind of seeing. I don't fully trust their attacking depth. QPR is that as well. I don't trust their defensive side particularly either, and it doesn't feel like they addressed much of the needs that they needed to address coming into the season. So I put QPR at 17. Pompey, I put at 16. Portsmouth is here. They did very well last year to be very comfortably away from relegation. And I feel like they have a lot of the same squad. They got a couple of really cool signings that could absolutely pay off and maybe actually put them even further up the table. But I just don't know if their midfield depth and their defensive depth is going to be enough to keep them up in the top half of the championship. So I'm just putting them here at 16, but I do really like some of the signings they had. They feel like risky but bold signings that they try to look and improve a lot of their positions of need. At 15, I have Wrexham. Wrexham have made a lot of interesting signings. They really have. I like the Windus signing in particular. Josh Windus is a good signing at striker. Like I said, coming into this, Wrexham this year need to really just want to survive this year, and they made a ton of signings. They've really opened the checkbook and tried to really make sure that they go gung ho for promotion. I just don't trust it. A lot of these signings are name signings, in my opinion. Connor Cody is another one that he got confirmed today by Wrexham. Just a lot of these, like Kiefer Moore and Josh Windus and Connor Cody, are just a lot of names that are known in the championship, but a lot of them are also older, and that's the problem for me. You're looking at an old squad, and I think in the championship you need to have a good balance of youth and experience, and this feels like a squad that's more on the experience heavy side, and that might cost them in terms of injuries and stuff. So I put them at 15. But if some of these signings do pan out, they could be higher. But I just don't trust them right now. Watford I have at 14. They made a couple of interesting signings, including the guy from Bayern that Zealand announced. I did like that one, but still at the same time, I still don't trust Watford to do much. It's Watford. I mean, they still have a lot of the same concerns they have coming out of last season, and I think they really didn't address much of it. But still, they could be better, but I just don't trust it, and so I put Watford here. Swansea made a lot of interesting, good moves. I did like some of what they've done in the transfer window. I feel like they will be better in the attacking front. I just don't know if defensively they could do much. So I'm going to put them here at 13, but with the caveat they could do better. Derby County is going to be a much improved team compared to last year. I think they have really been aggressive and trying to address a lot of needs with some quality experience, but also some quality youth as well. And I really like their transfer window. And I really think they could be a much more competitive team than they were last year, where they barely escaped relegation. I do not think that will be the case this year. I think they are going to be very much in the hunt for a lot of the season, then kind of tail off. But you have to give props to Derby County. They have gone out and tried to make sure they will not be in that position that they were last season. Bristol City, they haven't really done much this transfer window at all, and they really needed to off the backs of the playoff appearance they had last season. And losing Liam Manning, I think, really hurt them. And I do see them taking a step back, and that's why I put them at 11 here. I feel bad for them because this is a team that was very exciting last year and felt like they were, on the rise, but now they just don't feel like they're there anymore. West Brom is at number 10 for me. I like some of their signings. The new manager looks like a decent appointment as well, but at the same time, I just don't know if I can fully back them to be in the top six, but they have potential as well. At number 9, I have Norwich City, and Norwich has a potential. They have a lot of potential. Liam Manning comes in as the new manager for Norwich City, after they sacked their manager from last season. I don't quite fully buy in yet. And that may be a little bit of cynicism a bit, but this talent and the signings that Norwich have made, I could be totally wrong. They could be absolutely higher on this list. But right now I'm gonna have them at 9. At number 8, I have Millwall. They have made a lot of good signings. They have a great striking pairing. Coburn is a huge signing for Millwall at the striker position to get them some youth in this team. They have a lot of good potential in this Millwall team. They really do. I just don't know if they're quite playoff worthy. And a lot could change in the next month of the transfer window. I just don't quite see them making the playoffs. I think they could barely miss it. And it's kind of the same here with Middlesbrough. I have them at 7. I think it's been a slow transfer window. But this squad at starting level has a lot of the capability to be a playoff team and a good competing playoff team. Their preseason has shown that they just need some depth. And if they can bring in the depth in the next month of the transfer window, then this team is going to be absolutely scary in the championship. And Rob Edwards seems to have found a good system, and in the preseason they've also looked like they've been good at set pieces. So if they can bring in a few more signings and bring in some depth and experience, I think this Middlesbrough team will absolutely go higher up on my tables come mid-season and beyond. Leicester City is number 6 for me. They have a lot of the team from when they were in the championship and have a lot of good potential. However, they're going to be starting with a lot of points deductions. So to me, they're going to be just barely making the playoffs. But I do think they have the talent and the ability to be really good in the championship this season. But I think this playoff battle is going to be more chaotic than it was last year. And that's saying something. But Leicester City have the talent enough to make the playoffs. It's just a question of if they can get over the hump. And if Marchi Cifuentes is some proving to do with me, because he really didn't take QPR where I thought he could last year. And I really need to see him improve this squad before making my final call on Leicester City. But right now I have Leicester in the playoffs. Birmingham City, I have at number 5. This team has made a lot of solid, savvy moves. They got the striker from Celtic and has tried to really address and make savvy moves, loaning out players and using their checkbook to their full advantage. And props to them for that. I really am excited to see where this Birmingham team goes. They really are ambitious and trying to get back to the Prem, and it shows. And with the way they're being smart about it, I mean, honestly, who knows? This team could absolutely be a great team in the championship. It's just going to be a bloodbath. I do think 5 and 6 are going to be like, and 4 really are going to make this such a close playoff battle because the championship's just going to be a bloodbath. But I do think Birmingham City are the 5th best team right now in the championship. Coventry have really disappointed me. I really thought they would be a lot better and higher up on this list. But they really haven't done a ton, and they might be losing some players too come the end of this window. And they've missed a lot of their transfer targets as well. A lot of this just also depends on if Ellis Sims is good. If you're depending on Ellis Sims to be your striker godsend, I don't know. To me, that feels a little suspect. Yes, they still have some of their pieces from last year where they were really good and nearly made the final, but to me, it feels like they made a bit of a dip, and so I just put them at 4. They're still a top 6 championship side, in my opinion. I just don't know if I see them better than the top 3. Sheffield United for me is number 3. They still have a lot of the quality from last year. They did lose like some pieces like Ryan Brewster, who left on a free, I believe, but like still they have a lot of the core of this playoff final appearance team that nearly won it last year. So I just don't think you can count them out. And Ruben Selles, yes, he's the huge question mark for me, and that's why they're at number 3. But I do think they have a lot of good things going for them in this coming into the season. Southampton is number 2 for me. I feel like they are the most Prem ready relegated team in this of the 3 relegated sides that came down from the Premier League. I feel like Southampton is the more ready to come. Well, them and our number 1 team, which I'm sure you've figured out by now. But Southampton just feels like they've made some good additions. Will Still could be a genius move for Southampton at manager as well. I feel like this squad is so deep at defense and midfield, and they've got enough striker ability to just be so dangerous. And this team could absolutely crush the championship, along with our number 1 team, which is Ipswich Town. They have made so many good moves this offseason, and in the transfer window, they have showed they are ruthless and intend to go straight back up. And Kieran McKenna in the championship has been dominant. I do not expect anything less from this guy. He's one of the better managers in this league by far. I think this Ipswich team is going to be really good, but I do think this title race could be really tight as well. But it's going to be so fun to see now that we have the season coming up next week. Drop your 1 to 24s if you in the comments. I would love to hear your thoughts on any of these predictions, because this was so fun to make, but also kind of hard when it got to the top 10, because the bottom half felt really easy, but then the more you got up the list, the harder it got, because this championship is just going to be so chaotic, and I'm here for it. Oh, and that does it for another episode of the Pitch Grid. Thank you so much for joining us. If you're on YouTube watching, like, subscribe, and hit that bell so you never miss an upload. It only takes a couple of seconds, and we would greatly appreciate it. We are at 200 subscribers on YouTube, by the way. 200 of you guys want to watch on here, and that means so much. If you're listening on Spotify or Apple, a rating or follow goes a very long way. And also word of mouth as well. So if you can tell your friends about us and have them go follow us, if you enjoy our content, if you enjoy the analysis and the perspective and nuance we try to bring to every episode, please try to give us the best rating and review possible so more people can know and find us and be a part of this 9232. And we'll be back with more chaos, commentary, and coverage from the championship in the NFL next week. Until next time, y'all, stay sharp.